start with making the meatball mixture for the Swedish meatballs. So you guys are going to need a pretty large bowl to mix in. And the first thing I want you to do is go ahead, and your meat should be defrosted by now. It could be really cold, but we want to go ahead and make sure that it's not frozen. So open it up, and I'm going to go ahead and put the meat into my bowl. And to make it easy, I'm going to go ahead and add everything in here at one time. So that means a ½ cup of the breadcrumbs. Tell you what, I'll mix that up. I'm going to take just a fork and I'm going to break it up just to make sure there isn't any ice. And it will give me a little bit of my meat mixture on the bottom. I do have some gloves, but I'm using those to form the meat into meatballs and to mix. So let's go ahead and start with that. So into here, I'm going to add the ½ cup of breadcrumbs, okay, and the ½ cup of cream, and you can even add milk, yogurt, sour cream, a little bit of that dairy, 1 egg, no shells. I went ahead and diced up the onion. Now, the onion, when you guys cut it, you need to cut it really small, minced. So I gave you 1 whole onion. You are not going to need that whole onion. Couple of them I noticed have a couple of bad spots on it. So cut it in half just like you would normally do. Peel those layers away, cut it up really nice and small until you get your ½ cup of onion. Then you're going to need a ½ teaspoon of salt, a ¼ teaspoon of nutmeg, and a little bit of allspice, and I had that already in there for you. I'm going to add all of that, and a ½ teaspoon of black pepper. And that's it. So we're getting those spices of the nutmeg, the allspice, all from Scandinavia countries. I'm going to put my gloves on. The other thing you want to make sure you have handy for you is actually you need your red cutting board. Okay. We should be working on the red cutting board. And if you happen to have one of these, this is called a disher. I'm going to show you how to do it without. The disher is nice because what it does is makes all of your meatballs the same size. You want to have around 16 meatballs, okay? So I'm going to go in with just one hand right now, and I'm just going to mix and squeeze. So you can see if your onion is too big, it's going to not fit into that meatball. And we want to make sure that everything gets mixed in really well, or the onion's not going to kind of fall into the meatball form. So please make sure you cut the onion really nice and small. And we're going to do the same size meatballs so they cook evenly. And we're going to make sure. Now you can always do what's called a taster. So you could take a little piece of your meat and flatten it out like a little patty and cook it on the stovetop. That's a great way to adjust your seasoning. I think will be good. We are going to make that sauce that goes on them anyways. So it's going to taste really good from that. Okay, this is all mixed in. Now what I want you to do is take it out of your mixing bowl and go ahead and put it on your raw red cutting board, right? Because we know this is for raw meat. And I still have one clean hand. This is my dirty hand. And then I'm actually going to shape it so it is kind of a square, about the same thickness all the way through. I'm going to go ahead and use my other hand. And on the side of me, I have also a prepared half sheet pan that is lined, because these meatballs are going to go in the oven. They are not going to go on the stovetop. So we want 16. So what we want to do is we want to go 4 by 4. So you can just kind of use your knife. 1, 2. You can do 3, 4. And then do it the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then some of these I'm going to cut right here, and I'm going to add that meat onto the side. You want to cut them so that they're all very equal. So you can add some where you know your corners maybe are rounded a little bit and they don't look as thick as some of the other ones. But you want them, again, as even as you possibly can. All right, then I'm just going to take a meatball, I'm going to roll it in my hand, and I'm not going to push too hard. There we go. Because I want it to stay a little airy. I don't want to overwork them. So, put them all on a tray. I can't stop the video, so you're going to have to watch me make 16 meatballs. And I'm going to work really quick. If I start to see maybe they're a little too big or a little too small, I'll switch. This one's a little bigger. I'm going to pull a little bit off of that one, put it off to the side. Maybe I end up having maybe 17 or 18, which is fine. I'm placing them about an inch apart. They're not going to expand or anything, so they can be fairly close together, doing maybe rows of 3 or 4. And then we'll move on to the sauce. So you could do this with any style or flavoring that you want. You could add Italian seasoning in substitute of the nutmeg and allspice. You can cook them in that red sauce from first semester we made. Then you can do spaghetti and meatballs. You want to change the meat out to turkey or chicken. They'll be a little bit tender, a little bit lighter. You might need to add a little bit more breadcrumbs. Okay, we're almost there. I've preheat my oven to 400 and I've moved the rack right into the middle because I want it to be a nice even heat. What is that, 612 and 4. I'm going to have one odd one kind of on a row. Be all right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually move on to the root vegetables next because they're going to take a little bit longer. These meatballs are going to go into the oven for about 20-25 minutes and then they're going to finish in that sauce. So I want to make sure that I have enough time for them. Okay, let me show you. Let me take my glove off. Let me go ahead and turn you this way and you can see there's all my meatballs. All right, those are going to go in the oven and I'll be back to show you the mash. So meatballs are in the oven and what I wanted to show you, we're going to go ahead and start on those root vegetables. So rutabaga looks a lot like a turnip. Turnips are white and kind of purple. This is kind of a darker purple and a yellow. Both of them have that radishy type of flavor, so it adds a little bit of pepper to your root vegetables. I've also already peeled my 2 russet potatoes and my carrot. They're sitting off to the side waiting, but I wanted to show you how to peel this. But before we do, what I want you to do is go ahead and I'm going to use a medium sauce pot, and I went ahead and filled it up about halfway with water and went ahead and start to pre-cook, bring that water up to boil. All of these, even though they're root vegetables, they'll still cook a little bit at different temperatures. So I actually want to give the rutabaga, it's the densest, it's going to be the hardest for you to cut. I want to give it about 7 minutes maybe, head start. Then I'm going to throw the potatoes in for maybe 4 minutes, and then last I'm going to throw the carrot in, and I'm not going to even go really small on that carrot. So let me show you really quick how to go ahead and peel. So it's going to be just like an apple. You want to go ahead and take off a nice little thin layer all the way down. Now, I'm going to tell you, these are bigger than normal. Normally, they're size of maybe a tennis ball. These are probably more the size of softballs. So we might have to adjust. If you have any more seasoning, you can add any more of that seasoning of the white pepper or the allspice. If you don't, that's fine. Maybe just go ahead and add some more salt. So get off the end and then go ahead and take off this whole remainder of the skin. And sometimes it takes a couple of pulls on the vegetable. And we're going to cut that end off because, again, we cut off the roots just like we do on everything. But go down, get all that purple off. We don't want it to really color the mash mixture. So let me get rid of all of this skin off my cutting board. And again, anytime before you cut, clean your cutting board. Okay. So I'm going to cut off first. I'm being really careful. I'm going to cut off both ends of the root vegetable. And then that's going to give me something really flat to cut. I would go about 1/2 inch on these. So a couple times through. So maybe 1/4 them to start with. Okay, and then turn your flat sides down. I can see my water is already starting to boil. And I'm going to go into about 6 pieces, okay? And then I'm going to throw them right in that boiling water. Because again, I want to give them a really nice head start. Because if I put everything in at the same time, the carrot's almost going to dissipate and just fall apart in the water. And it's going to be hard when you go to drain it. It's just going to be gone. And then we don't want to make soup. So again, these are in. I'm going to set a timer for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting up the potatoes and the carrot, and I'll show you what those look like. My timer just went off. It's been 5 minutes on those rutabaga. So, and you can see I did pretty large on those potatoes too. This would be the size that maybe you did your mashed potatoes or even when you did your soup. So I'm going to go ahead and add the potatoes in now. And I still have plenty of water in there. So again, I filled that water probably about halfway. It's probably about 4 cups, if not a little more. Now, the boiling's going to stop for just a little bit, so I am going to go ahead and put the lid back on. When it comes up to a boil, I can take that lid back off. Let's go 5 more minutes and then add the carrots. So it's been 5 more minutes again. Lid's coming off, and I'm going to add just that little bit of carrot. Now, the carrot's going to help add a little bit of sweetness to your dish, and it's going to change the color up just a little bit. So now what we're going to do, I would say you could probably go for another 5 minutes. Watch it, the lid's on. I think I'm going to just tilt the lid again so I'm not going to be boiling over. Now the next time you're checking is you're looking for everything to be fork tender. So you want to check a rutabaga, potato, and a carrot. If 2 of them are done, you need to wait for that 3rd one to get fork tender before we drain them. So you can see they're all drained and you can see the nice colors. So now into here, I want to add all my other seasonings. So it called for 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to start with that. I may end up adding a little bit more just because, again, I told you that those root vegetables came in really big. So I'm going to add, now it tells you that 1/4 cup of vegetable stock or water, and that's depending on how you like it. I actually don't do vegetable stock or water. I actually like cream, or in this case, I'm just going to use some milk. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's season it up with the salt. I gave you that allspice and the white pepper you should have left over from last week. So let's add all of that in there. Just a pinch of each and a little bit of cinnamon. So it doesn't take a lot. Gonna go ahead and just use my potato masher. I can see my butter is already starting to melt. So just like we did last week with those garlic smashed potatoes, mash them up. And I, in fact, on this one, like it to be even really nice and mashed together. You'll see flakes of orange, maybe a little bit of yellow, but try to really get in there. Mash them up and then taste it. Decide. Maybe your texture is what you like and you don't want to add any more milk or dairy or anything to it. Or maybe you want to add a little bit more butter or a little bit more salt. We definitely want to be tasting it. We don't have an exact weight on potatoes, carrots, and the rutabaga, so you're going to have to taste to season. Okay, that's where I am so far. Smells really good. The cinnamon adds this little bit of warmth to it. The allspice, don't go crazy with that because that can overpower. But again, root vegetables are bland. Might need some more salt and, again, pepper. So, gonna taste before I adjust. See where we're at. I always add more salt. I do want to add some more white pepper. Oops, just a little bit. And I think I am going to add a little bit more cinnamon to it. I have a little bit more sitting here. Add a little bit more of that cinnamon. Remember, your salt intake might be a little bit different depending if you're using the table salt. Plus, I always buy unsalted butter, so I have that control of salt as well. So if you have salted butter at home, again, yours might be a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to skip the dairy. I'm going to leave the dairy, no milk, no cream, but I am going to add just a little bit more butter. Okay, so these are going to just sit here and stay warm. I'm going to put them on the back burner with the lid on, and let's go on to checking our meatballs and then moving on to our sauce. All right, these meatballs went for 20 minutes. And then what I want you to do is I want you to check the center of them. So I'm going to actually go for the biggest meatball just because that's going to tell me whether it's done. It's really golden brown on one side. So you could flip them and put them all in for just about 5 more minutes to get that other side. But what I want to do is I want to cut it directly in half and I want to check the inside. And what you want to make sure is that you don't see really any pink. So I may finish them off for that 5 more minutes. I'm just going to put that cut side down. Give them all just a quick little turn. Put them in the oven for 5 more minutes. Turn the oven off maybe even, because they are done. And then let's move on to making the sauce. The meatballs will stay hot. We'll have the root vegetables that are hot. And we're going to make that delicious little sauce. All right, let me put these in. Let's move on to making the cream sauce. So we're gonna make what really would be a pan gravy. You could have even cooked your meatballs in a skillet. I tend to like to cook them in the oven because as you try to flip them and rotate, they could fall apart on you. But when you check those meatballs, you saw there was like that meat fat. You could use that as a substitute for your butter. I actually still add it in because I like my sauce to really have that flavor. So you're going to need now your 1 tablespoon of butter, your 2 tablespoons of flour, and this is going to make what's called a roux, okay? Then we have some salt to season. I gave you this little beef stock. So I put 1 cup of water in the microwave or your kettle. Heat up 1 cup of water, and you need to dissolve this, okay? This is that little powdered base. So add that whole thing in there. Now, if you keep kosher, just eliminate your cream altogether. Use your beef stock. And if you don't use the butter, go ahead and use whatever fat you like as a substitute, or use that beef fat that's coming off that tray. Okay, so we have this ready to go. Let's move over to the stove, and what we're going to use now, I'm going to use what's the saute pan. So it's not a fry pan. It does have a lid that fits on it. I didn't do too big. I want enough that I can fit the meatballs in here when they come out of the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on to about a medium high to heat up. And what I'm going to start with first is I'm going to put that fat in there. Let me get you a little closer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add my fat, and I'm going to start to melt that. The only other thing I'm going to need is a whisk. Anytime we're trying to do a roux or we're trying to add flour into some sort of fat, we want to whisk it in, and it's going to have the thickness of toothpaste, okay? And then we're going to add our hot stock into that and then finish it with the cream. All right, let's let this pan warm up, and I'll get everything cleaned. Okay, our butter is all nicely melted, even just starting to brown a little bit. Add your flour. Now keep your heat down on a kind of a low. We don't want to burn it. And what you're going to see is the butter is going to absorb that flour. That's called gelatinization, that flour. And I'm going to toast it just a little bit, not too much, and then go in with the stock and add it. I'm going to take it off the heat really quick. I let it get a little too hot. Woo, there we go. Okay, add all of the beef stock and whisk. So don't let your pan get too hot. And then you'll see it's going to start thickening up, and keep it on a low. Now, if it's getting too thick, you can add some just more water to it, or you can add your cream if you're using your cream. If you run out of cream, you can add milk, okay? So this is basically done. Now I want to taste it in a little bit because I don't want to add the salt quite yet because I know that that beef stock could be a little salty. So we're going to let this sit. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off the heat so it doesn't get too thick. Going to add my cream. That will help a little bit. Now if it sits here and you're not ready for it, it will probably thicken up on you. And then you can go ahead and, again, thin it out with some water or some other dairy product. All right, so before I taste this, I'm actually going to go get my meatballs out of the oven, and we'll finish this up. All right, I have meatballs in my hand that just came out of the oven. I'm going to tip it to the side, and what you guys are going to see is I'm going to continue to add that little bit of fat that's coming from those meatballs, because, again, I think that's really a lot of flavor. If you don't want to, you're grossed out by it, fine, don't do it, okay? I'm going to add that just right there, and I'm going to whisk it in really quick. Okay, I still need to cut up just maybe a little bit of parsley for garnish. Not really a lot of salt. That beef stock gave it plenty of salt. All right, let me take the meatballs very gently. I'm going to start putting these right into my cream sauce. Okay. So we're going to get these all tossed in with the cream sauce, and I'll show you how to plate up dinner. Okay, let's plate this up. reheated my root vegetables. You can do this any way you want. I don't mind my food mixing, and I kind of like the gravy helps season on top of my root vegetables. So I'm going to plate them right in the middle. This is probably, again, this is a dinner for 4, but okay, plate those right in, and I'm just going to kind of move them around so they kind of make the little base. Then I'm going to take my meatballs, right? 4 meatballs per person. Let's do 3. Let's do 4. I'll be greedy, I'm the chef. I'm going to do my 5th one, why not? It looks better. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take some of that gravy even that's on the side. I'm just going to put a little bit more right over the top. And then I happen to have just a little bit more parsley right on the top of it. And that's it. So there are your Swedish meatballs with your mashed root vegetables. Enjoy, you guys.